The blood-red sunset painted the horizon as Katherine Wilson collapsed against the fence post at the edge of town, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her once pristine blue dress was torn and stained with dirt, her blonde hair falling in tangles around her bruised face. The promise of a new life in Cottonwood Springs had quickly turned into a nightmare at the hands of the town's most feared man. Now she had nowhere to run, no one to turn to, and the last of her strength was fading fast. Katherine's vision blurred as she attempted to take another step. The pain in her ribs made each breath an agony. She'd escaped her tormentor, but for how long? In a town this small, he would find her by nightfall. As she staggered forward, her knees finally buckled beneath her. She crumpled to the ground, the last rays of sunlight casting long shadows across the dusty road. Through the haze of pain, she heard the steady rhythm of approaching hoofbeats. Katherine tried to push herself up, to hide, to run, but her body refused to obey. A tall figure on the horseback slowed to a stop beside her. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the dirt. Katherine flinched as he knelt beside her, expecting another blow. Instead, she felt the weight of the coat being gently laid across her shoulders. "Easy now," a deep voice murmured. "I'm not going to hurt you, miss." Katherine looked up into eyes the color of a summer sky, set in a sun-bronzed face framed by sandy brown hair. The cowboy's expression was a mixture of concern and barely contained anger as he took in the state of her. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice tight with restrained fury. Before Katherine could answer, she heard shouts from the direction of town. The cowboy's gaze flicked toward the commotion, then back to her. Without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms. "I choose you," he said simply, carrying her toward his horse. "I don't know what trouble you're in, but I'm getting you out of here." It was 1878, and as the horse galloped away from Cottonwood Springs, Katherine Wilson had no idea that the stranger's choice would forever change the course of both their lives. "Name's Jacob Morgan," the cowboy told her once they'd put several miles between themselves and town. "Most folks call me Jake. I've got a cabin about an hour's ride from here. We'll be safe there while you heal up." Katherine gripped the saddle horn, her body nestled against his chest as they rode. "Katherine Wilson," she whispered through cracked lips. "They call me Kate." Jake nodded. "Nice to meet you, Miss Kate, though I wish it were under better circumstances." The rhythmic motion of the horse made Kate's injuries throb with renewed pain. She bit her lip to keep from crying out, but Jake sensed her discomfort. "Not much further now," he assured her. "My place isn't much, but it's quiet, and nobody will look for you there." As they rode, the landscape changed from open prairie to a more wooded area. Eventually, they approached a small cabin nestled against a backdrop of pine trees. A creek bubbled nearby, and a fenced corral stood to one side, with a weathered barn behind it. Jake dismounted first, then carefully helped Kate down from the horse. Her legs immediately gave way, and he caught her before she fell. "I've got you," he said, lifting her into his arms once more. The cabin was simple but neat. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a small kitchen area occupied another, and a narrow bed stood in the corner. Jake gently lowered Kate onto a worn leather chair near the fireplace. "Let me get a fire going," he said. "It gets cold at night." Kate watched as he efficiently stacked kindling and logs, then struck a match. Within minutes, a warm glow filled the cabin. Jake filled a basin with water from a bucket near the door, and brought it to her along with a clean cloth. "I don't mean to pry," he said, handing her the dampened cloth, "but someone beat you pretty badly. Are they likely to come looking?" Kate pressed the cool cloth to her swollen cheek. "His name is Randall Barton. He owns half the businesses in Cottonwood Springs and has the sheriff in his pocket." Her voice trembled. "I came west to teach at the school. Barton took an interest in me. When I refused his advances, She couldn't finish the sentence. Jake's jaw tightened. "No man has the right to treat a woman that way." "He'll look for me," Kate said. "He doesn't like losing what he considers his property." "You're not property," Jake said firmly, "and you're safe here for as long as you need." Kate met his gaze. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me." Jake was quiet for a moment. "My ma raised me to believe that a person's character is shown in the choices they make when nobody's watching." He shrugged. "I couldn't ride past someone in need. It's not in me to do that." For the first time since her ordeal began, Kate felt a small flicker of hope. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan." "Jake," he corrected with a gentle smile. "Mr. Morgan was my pa, and he's been gone these past 5 years. That night, Jake insisted Kate take the bed while he made a pallet on the floor near the fireplace. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Kate. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Randall Barton's face contorted with rage. Her body ached from the beating, but it was the fear that kept her awake. In the dim firelight, she studied her rescuer. Jake slept on his back, one arm flung above his head, his breathing deep and even. There was something comforting about his presence, a steadiness that made her feel that perhaps, just perhaps, everything might be all right. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through the cabin's single window. Kate awoke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Jake stood at the small stove, his back to her as he tended to breakfast. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Hope you're hungry." Kate eased herself up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. "I could eat," she admitted. It had been over a day since her last meal. Jake brought her a plate with bacon, beans, and a thick slice of bread. "It's not fancy cooking, but it'll keep body and soul together." They ate in comfortable silence. When they'd finished, Jake collected the plates and set them in a basin. "I need to tend to the horses and check a few trap," he said. "Will you be all right here alone for a while?" Kate nodded. "I'll be fine. I don't think I could go far, even if I wanted to." Jake hesitated at the door. "I have a shotgun under the bed if you need it. Do you know how to use one?" "My father taught me," Kate replied, "before he died in the war." Jake nodded, satisfied. "I won't be long." After he left, Kate took stock of her injuries in the small mirror hanging on the wall. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut, a deep purple bruise spreading across her cheekbone. Her split lip had scabbed over, and various bruises dotted her arms where Barton had grabbed her. She gingerly felt her ribs, wincing at the tenderness, but relieved that nothing seemed broken. Using the remaining water in the basin, she cleaned herself as best she could. Her dress was beyond repair, torn and stained with blood and dirt. With no alternatives, she put it back on, resolving to find a way to wash it properly later. Kate explored the cabin, noting the sparse but functional furnishings. A shelf held a few books surprising in a cowboy's cabin. She ran her finger along the spines. Twain, Whitman, a volume of Shakespeare's sonnets. Not what she'd expected at all. A small trunk at the foot of the bed contained clothing all men's. Naturally, and beneath a folded shirt, she found a tintype photograph. It showed a younger Jake standing beside an older couple, presumably his parents. They looked proud, their hands resting on his shoulders. Jake wasn't smiling in the photograph, but there was a contentedness in his expression that touched her. The sound of approaching footsteps made her hastily return the photograph and close the trunk. When Jake entered, he carried a bundle wrapped in canvas. "Found these at the bottom of my trunk," he said, handing her the package. "They belong to my mother. They might be a bit dated, but they're clean and whole, which is more than can be said for what you're wearing." Kate unwrapped the bundle to find a simple brown skirt, a cream-colored blouse, and undergarments. The clothes were well made if a bit worn around the edges. "I couldn't possibly," she began. "They're no use to anyone gathering dust," Jake interrupted gently. "My ma would have wanted them to help someone in need." Kate's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for everything." Jake looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I'll step outside while you change. Give a shout when you're decent." The clothes fit reasonably well, though the skirt was a bit short, revealing Kate's ankles. When Jake returned, he stopped in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Do they fit all right?" he asked, his voice sounding strangely rough. Kate smoothed the skirt. "They're perfect. Your mother must have been a woman of taste." Jake cleared his throat. "She was at that." He set his hat on a hook by the door. "I checked the trail back to town. No sign that anyone's following, but that doesn't mean they won't come looking eventually." "What will we do when they do?" Kate asked. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about that. I've got a friend who runs a way station about 20 miles north of here. He might be able to help get you to Denver or even further east if that's what you want." The thought of leaving brought an unexpected pang of sadness. "I don't know what I want," Kate admitted. "I came west to start a new life. I had dreams of teaching, of making a difference." She touched her bruised face. "Now I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again." Jake's expression softened. "You will. It may take time, but you're stronger than you know." Kate Wilson. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Jake would rise early to tend to his chores, while Kate recovered her strength. She insisted on helping around the cabin, cooking meals and tidying up. The work gave her a sense of purpose and helped keep the darker thoughts at bay. In the evenings, they sat by the fire. Sometimes Jake would read aloud from one of his books, his deep voice bringing the words to life. Other times, they simply talked. Kate learned that Jake had been born in Missouri but had come west with his parents after the war. When they died, his father from a fall while repairing the roof, his mother from pneumonia. The following winter, Jake had stayed on, working the small homestead and occasionally taking jobs as a ranch hand or guide. "What about you?" Jake asked one evening as they shared a pot of coffee. "What brought you all the way from where was it?" "Ohio," Kate replied. "My mother died when I was young. My father raised me until he joined the Union Army. He never came home." She stared into her cup. "After that, I lived with my aunt in Cincinnati. She paid for my education, but when she passed last year, I found myself alone. I saw an advertisement for a teacher needed in Cottonwood Springs, and it seemed like Providence." "How did Barton come into the picture?" Jake asked carefully. Kate sighed. "He owns the boarding house where I was staying. At first, he was charming, attentive. Then his attentions became more insistent. When I continued to refuse him, he became angry. He threatened to have me removed as teacher." Her hands trembled around the cup. "Yesterday, was it only yesterday? He was waiting when I returned from school. He'd been drinking. He said if I wouldn't be his willingly, he'd take what he wanted." Jake's knuckles whitened as he gripped his own cup. "Did he know?" Kate said quickly. "I fought back. I managed to get away, but not before." She gestured to her face. "I ran until I couldn't run anymore. That's when you found me." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Barton needs to answer for what he's done. The law won't touch him, Kate said bitterly. He owns the sheriff, the mayor, half the town council. There are other kinds of justice, Jake replied, a hard edge to his voice. Kate reached across the table to touch his hand. Promise me you won't do anything foolish. I couldn't bear it if you were hurt because of me. The touch of her hand on his seemed to startle Jake. He looked down at where their hands met, then back at her face. Something passed between them, a current of understanding and something more, something neither was ready to name. I promise to be careful, Jake said finally. That's all I can offer. By the end of the week, Kate's bruises had begun to fade from purple to yellow. The pain in her ribs had subsided to a dull ache, and she moved more freely. Each day she ventured a little further from the cabin, regaining her confidence along with her strength. One morning, she woke to find Jake already gone. A note on the table informed her that he'd ridden to check on a neighbor and would be back by midday. Kate decided to use the time to wash clothes in the creek. The day was warm, the sky a brilliant blue overhead. Birds called from the trees as Kate knelt by the creek, scrubbing Jake's shirts against a smooth rock. The domestic task gave her a curious sense of contentment, as if this simple act connected her to generations of women who had done the same before her. So absorbed was she in her task that she didn't hear the approach of riders until they were almost upon her. By the time she looked up, 3 men on horseback had emerged from the trees on the opposite bank. Kate's heart froze when she recognized the man in the center, Randall Barton. Well, well, Barton drawled, his thin lips curving into a cruel smile. Look what we have here. The schoolmarm playing at being a pioneer woman. Kate stood slowly, clutching a wet shirt to her chest like a shield. How did you find me? Barton dismounted, handing his reins to one of his companions. This is a small territory, Katherine. People talk. A pretty blonde woman riding double with a cowboy tends to get noticed. He stepped closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. Did you really think you could run from me? Kate backed away, her gaze darting to the cabin. The shotgun was inside, under the bed, if she could reach it. Your cowboy isn't here to protect you, Barton said, following her gaze. We saw him riding north earlier. It's just you and me, sweetheart, just like it should be. Stay away from me, Kate warned, continuing to back up. Barton laughed. Or what? You'll scream? No one's going to hear you out here. He turned to his companions. Wait here. This won't take long. As Barton started across the shallow creek, Kate turned and ran for the cabin. She could hear him splashing through the water behind her, his boots heavy on the rocky bank. Her bare feet flew over the ground, but Barton was faster. Just as she reached the cabin door, his hand closed around her arm, yanking her backward. No more running, he growled, spinning her to face him. His breath reeked of whiskey as he leaned in close. You're coming back to town with me where you belong. I don't belong to you, Kate spat, struggling against his grip. Barton's face darkened with rage. You ungrateful. He raised his hand to strike her. The distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked stopped him mid-swing. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Jake's voice came from behind them, steady and cold as ice. Barton froze, then slowly turned his head. Jake stood 20 paces away, his rifle aimed squarely at Barton's chest. This doesn't concern you, cowboy, Barton said, though his bravado was undercut by the way his eyes kept flicking to the rifle. When you put your hands on a woman on my property, it very much concerns me, Jake replied. Now let her go and step away. Barton hesitated, his grip on Kate's arm tightening painfully. Jake took a step closer. I won't ask twice, he said quietly. There was something in his tone that made Kate shiver despite the warmth of the day, a deadly certainty that if Barton didn't comply, Jake would put a bullet through him without hesitation or remorse. Barton must have heard it too. He released Kate's arm and stepped back, raising his hands slightly. Easy now. No need for bloodshed. I'm just here to collect what's mine. She doesn't belong to you, Jake said, keeping the rifle trained on Barton. She doesn't belong to anyone. Barton's laugh was ugly. So noble. But do you know what kind of woman you're defending? Ask her how many men she led on in Cottonwood Springs before me. Ask her about the married men she flirted with. I never, Kate began, outraged. Shut up, Barton snapped. Jake's finger tightened almost imperceptibly on the trigger. Don't speak to her like that again. Barton seemed to realize how precarious his position was. His expression shifted to something more calculating. Look, I'm willing to be reasonable. How much? Jake frowned. How much what? How much for the woman? Barton clarified, as if discussing the price of livestock. I'll pay you fair market value, more than fair. Jake's face hardened. Get on your horse and ride away while you still can. Don't be a fool, Barton persisted. She's just a woman. They're all the same in the rifle cracked, and dirt exploded an inch from Barton's right boot. He jumped back with a yelp. That was a warning, Jake said calmly. The next one goes through your knee, the one after that considerably higher. Barton's face flushed with anger, but fear won out. He backed away slowly. This isn't over, he threatened. I have friends in high places. You'll regret this. Not as much as you'll regret staying here another minute, Jake replied. With a final venomous glare, Barton turned and stalked back to where his companions waited. They exchanged words Kate couldn't hear. Then all three mounted and rode away. Only when they disappeared into the trees did Jake lower his rifle. Kate realized she'd been holding her breath and let it out in a shuddering exhale. Her legs felt suddenly weak, and she sank to her knees on the ground. Jake was beside her in an instant, his rifle set aside as his hands gently gripped her shoulders. Are you hurt? Did he hurt you? Kate shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. No, I'm not hurt. He found me. He'll always find me. Jake's arms went around her, and she leaned into his warmth, her tears soaking into his shirt. He held her, one hand stroking her hair until her sobs subsided. We need to leave, he said finally, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. They'll be back, probably with more men. Kate pulled back to look at him. Jake met her gaze steadily. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. But this is your home, Kate protested. Your land, your life. I can't ask you to give that up. You didn't ask, Jake said simply. I'm offering. He stood, helping her to her feet. We need to move quickly. Pack only what you need. We'll leave within the hour. Kate watched as Jake moved with practiced efficiency, gathering supplies, ammunition, a few personal items. She followed his lead, folding the clothes he'd given her and placing them in a small bundle. Where will we go? She asked as they worked. West initially, Jake replied. I have a friend with a ranch near the territorial border. We can stay there while we figure out our next move. The word "our" warmed something inside Kate. For so long, she'd been alone. Even when surrounded by others in Cincinnati or Cottonwood Springs, she'd felt isolated, adrift. Now, despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, she felt a connection to this quiet, steadfast man. As they prepared to leave, Kate paused by the small trunk, remembering the photograph she'd seen. Wait, she said, kneeling to open it. She found the tintype and held it out to Jake. You should bring this. Jake took the photograph, his expression softening as he looked at the image of his parents. Thank you, he said quietly. I nearly forgot. Within the hour they were mounted and ready to leave. Jake on his bay gelding, Kate on a sturdy dun mare Jake kept as a spare mount. They carried only what would fit in their saddlebags: food, a change of clothes, ammunition, and a few precious personal items. Jake took one last look at the cabin where he'd lived for 5 years. My pa built this place with his own hands, he said, a note of regret in his voice. But it's just wood and nails in the end. The memories come with us. Kate felt a twinge of guilt. I'm sorry you have to leave it. Jake turned to her, his eyes clear and certain. Don't be. Some things are worth leaving for. The way he looked at her when he said it made Kate's heart skip a beat. They rode west, keeping to less traveled routes, avoiding towns and settlements. Jake set a brisk pace, pushing the horses as much as he dared. By nightfall, they'd covered nearly 20 miles. They made camp in a small grove of cottonwoods near a stream. Jake built a small, nearly smokeless fire while Kate prepared a simple meal from their provisions. They ate in companionable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. After they'd finished eating, Jake spread his bedroll on one side of the fire, and Kate's on the other. The night was clear, stars spreading like diamonds across the velvet sky. Do you think they're following us? Kate asked as they settled in for the night. Jake poked at the dying embers of the fire. Probably. Barton strikes me as a man who doesn't like to lose, but we've got a good head start, and I know this country better than they do. Kate pulled her blanket closer against the night chill. What will happen when we reach your friend's ranch? Frank Davis is a good man, Jake said. He'll give us shelter, help us figure out what to do next. He looked across the fire at her. What do you want to do, Kate? If you could go anywhere, do anything, what would it be? The question caught her off guard. For so long, her choices had been limited by circumstances, by the expectations of others, by sheer survival. What did she want? The answer came to her with surprising clarity. I want to teach, she said. It's what I was trained for, what I'm good at. I want to make a difference in children's lives. She paused. But I also want to feel safe, to not have to look over my shoulder every minute. Jake nodded. There are growing settlements further west, places where a school teacher would be welcome, where Barton's influence wouldn't reach. And you? Kate asked. What do you want? Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring into the dying fire. I thought I knew, he said finally. I had my piece of land, my animals. I was content with my own company. He looked up, meeting her eyes across the flames. But now I'm not so sure. There was something in his gaze that made Kate's breath catch. Before she could respond, Jake stood abruptly. We should get some sleep, he said. Dawn comes early and we've got a long ride ahead. Kate lay awake long after Jake's breathing had deepened into sleep, watching the stars wheel overhead and wondering about the road that stretched before them. They rode for 3 more days, keeping a westward course. Jake proved to be a skilled woodsman, finding game for their meals and choosing campsites that offered both shelter and defensible positions. On the evening of the 4th day, they crested a ridge and saw a sprawling ranch in the valley below. Davis Ranch, Jake said, pointing to the collection of buildings nestled against a backdrop of rugged hills. Cattle dotted the surrounding grassland, and smoke curled from the chimney of the main house. As they approached, a tall man with iron-gray hair emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. When he recognized Jake, A broad smile split his weathered face. "Jacob Morgan, as I live and breathe," he called, lowering the rifle. "It's been, what, 2 years?" Jake dismounted, grasping the older man's hand. "Too long, Frank. This is Miss Katherine Wilson. Kate, this is Frank Davis, the man I told you about." Frank tipped his hat to Kate. "Madame, any friend of Jake's is welcome here." Jake's expression grew serious. "We're in a bit of trouble, Frank. Need a place to lay low for a spell." Frank's gaze sharpened, taking in their trail-worn appearance. "Well, you'd better come inside and tell me all about it. Martha's just putting supper on the table, and you both look like you could use a hot meal." Frank's wife, Martha, was a plump, cheerful woman who fussed over them, insisting they eat second helpings of everything. After dinner, while Martha showed Kate to a guest room, Jake explained their situation to Frank. "Barton!" Frank spat when Jake finished. "I've heard of him. Bad business, that one. Word is he's got connections with some unsavory types all through the territory." "How far do you think his reach extends?" Jake asked. Frank considered. "Hard to say. Certainly through most of the Eastern Territory. Maybe not this far west, but he's got friends in the capital from what I hear." Jake frowned. "We need to get further away then. California maybe, or up to Oregon Territory." "Winter's coming," Frank reminded him. "Mountain passes will be closing soon. You'd be better off waiting till spring." Jake shook his head. "I don't think we have that long. Barton's not the type to give up easily." Frank was quiet for a moment. "I might have a solution," he said finally. "My sister's husband owns a trading post in Wyoming Territory near the Shoshone Reservation. It's remote, hard to find if you don't know where to look. They could use help there. He's getting on in years, and they've been looking for someone to take over eventually." "A trading post?" Jake repeated thoughtfully. "They do good business with the tribes and with trappers," Frank explained, "and they have been wanting to start a school for the Shoshone children. My sister mentioned in her last letter that they were hoping to find a teacher." Jake's eyes widened. "That might be perfect for Kate." "It's a hard life," Frank warned, "isolated, especially in winter, but if you're looking to disappear, you could do worse." Later, Jake related the conversation to Kate as they sat on the porch of the Davis home, watching the stars come out. "Wyoming," Kate said, testing the word. "I never imagined going that far west." "It's your choice," Jake said. "If you want to head east instead, back to Ohio or beyond, I'll see you safely there." Kate studied his profile in the gathering darkness. "And then what would you do?" Jake shrugged. "Find somewhere to start over, I suppose." "Without me." The words slipped out before Kate could stop them. Jake turned to look at her, surprise evident in his expression. "Would that matter to you?" Kate felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she held his gaze. "Yes," she said simply. "It would matter very much." Something changed in Jake's eyes, a softening, a spark of something that might have been hope. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "Then I'll go wherever you go," he said quietly. "If you'll have me." Kate's heart hammered in her chest. "I think I'd like that very much." The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility. Then, from inside the house, Martha called that she'd prepared hot water for baths if they wanted them. The spell broken, they stood and went inside. But something had changed between them, a threshold crossed, a promise made. The next morning, Frank brought out maps, showing them the route to his sister's trading post. It would be a journey of nearly 300 miles, through mountainous terrain that would grow increasingly difficult as winter approached. "If you leave within the week, you should make it before the heavy snows," Frank said. "I can outfit you with supplies, better horses, winter gear. Consider it payment for that time you saved my hide from those rustlers." Jake protested, but Frank wouldn't hear of it. A man pays his debts, Jake. You know that. They spent the next few days preparing for the journey. Frank's ranch hands kept watch for any sign of Barton or his men, but none appeared. Either they'd lost the trail or they were biding their time. On the eve of their departure, Martha insisted on hosting a proper dinner. She even convinced Kate to wear one of her daughter's dresses, a pretty blue calico that matched her eyes. Jake, scrubbed clean and wearing a borrowed shirt, could hardly take his eyes off her. After dinner, while Frank and Martha cleared the table, Jake asked Kate to step outside with him. The night was clear, a full moon bathing the landscape in silver light. "I have something to ask you," Jake said, an unusual nervousness in his manner. "Something important." Kate's pulse quickened. "What is it?" Jake took her hands in his. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've known you all my life. These past weeks, despite everything, have been the best of my life because you were in them." Kate's eyes filled with tears. "Jake, please let me finish," he said. "I'm not a wealthy man. I don't have much to offer except my hands and my heart, but both are yours if you want them." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Katherine Wilson, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my heart?" Kate could scarcely breathe past the emotion welling in her throat. This man who had rescued her, protected her, respected her, this man was offering her his life, his love. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Jake Morgan, I will marry you." Jake stood, pulling her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both tender and fiercely possessive. Kate wound her arms around his neck, returning the kiss with equal fervor. When they finally parted, both breathless, Jake rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have a ring to give you," he said regretfully. "I don't need a ring," Kate replied. "I just need you." The sound of a throat clearing made them turn. Frank and Martha stood in the doorway, smiling broadly. "I take it congratulations are in order," Frank said, his eyes twinkling. Martha hurried forward to embrace them both. "Oh, this is wonderful! We must have the wedding before you leave." "Before we leave?" Kate repeated, startled. "But that's in 2 days." "All the more reason to do it now," Martha insisted. "You'll want to start your new life together properly, as husband and wife." Frank nodded his agreement. "I'll ride for the preacher tomorrow. He can be here by evening." And so, with a speed that left Kate's head spinning, wedding preparations commenced. Martha enlisted the help of neighboring women, who arrived the next day bearing food and flowers. One even brought a white dress that her daughter had worn for her own wedding, offering it to Kate with teary-eyed generosity. The dress required some hasty alterations, as Kate was taller than the original wearer. But by the evening of the next day, it was ready. Martha helped her dress, arranging her hair with wildflowers. "You look beautiful, dear," Martha said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Jake's a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Kate replied softly. The ceremony took place at sunset in Frank's orchard, with apple trees in full bloom providing a natural cathedral. The preacher, a kindly older man with twinkling eyes, spoke words of love and commitment that resonated deep in Kate's heart. When it came time for the vows, Jake's voice was steady and sure. "I, Jacob Morgan, take you, Katherine Wilson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love, honor, and protect you in good times and bad, in sickness and in health, until death parts us." Kate repeated the words, her voice catching with emotion. "I, Katherine Wilson, take you, Jacob Morgan, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you in good times and bad, in sickness and in health, until death parts us." "By the power vested in me," the preacher concluded. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Jake's kiss was gentle, yet filled with promise. When they turned to face their small audience, Kate felt a surge of joy unlike anything she'd experienced before. Despite the circumstances that had brought them together, despite the uncertainty that lay ahead, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The celebration afterward was modest, but joyful. The ranch hands played fiddles and harmonicas, and there was dancing in the barn until late in the night. Kate, who had never expected to find love, let alone marriage, in the midst of her flight from danger, felt as though she were living in a dream. As the party wound down, Jake led her to her small cabin at the edge of the property that Frank had prepared for them. Candles glowed in the windows, and inside, someone had scattered wildflowers across the bed. "Mrs. Morgan," Jake said softly, closing the door behind them. The name sent a thrill through Kate. "It sounds strange," she admitted, "but wonderful." Jake's eyes were dark with desire as he stepped closer. "May I?" he asked, his fingers hovering near the buttons of her dress. Kate nodded, her heart racing. She'd known this moment would come, had both feared and anticipated it, but as Jake's fingers gently worked the buttons, his eyes never leaving hers, she felt no fear, only a growing warmth, a rightness that banished all doubt. Their first night together was a revelation of tenderness and passion. Jake proved to be a considerate lover, guiding Kate through unfamiliar territory with gentle patience. In his arms, she discovered sensations she had never imagined, pleasures that made her cry out in wonder. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms, her head pillowed on his chest, Kate marveled at how far she had come from that terrified woman, staggering away from Cottonwood Springs. "What are you thinking?" Jake asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I'm thinking that sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best," she replied. "If Randall Barton hadn't," she hesitated, still unwilling to dwell on that dark time. "If you hadn't found me that day, we never would have met." Jake's arms tightened around her. "I've never been a religious man," he said, "but finding you makes me think there might be a plan to things after all, that we were meant to find each other." Kate smiled against his skin. "My father used to say that God moves in mysterious ways." "Your father was a wise man," Jake murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. They set out for Wyoming 2 days later, with fresh horses and well-stocked saddlebags. Frank insisted on sending one of his ranch hands, a taciturn man named Wilson, to escort them part of the way. "Just until you cross the territorial line," Frank said when Jake protested. "Humor an old man, will you?" The journey was arduous, but not without its moments of beauty. They rode through forests of pine and aspen, crossed rushing streams, and traversed high meadows carpeted with wildflowers. Each night they made camp together, their bedrolls now spread side by side beneath the stars. On the 5th day, they reached the territorial border. Wilson, having fulfilled his obligation, bid them farewell and turned back toward the Davis Ranch. Jake and Kate continued northward, following Frank's carefully drawn map. The terrain grew more rugged as they progressed, the mountains looming larger on the horizon. Game was plentiful, and Jake's skill with a rifle ensured they ate well. Kate, determined not to be a burden, learned quickly how to make camp efficiently, how to start a fire even in damp conditions, how to move through the wilderness leaving minimal trace. On the 12th day of their journey, as they followed a narrow trail along a ridge, Jake suddenly reined in his horse, holding up a hand for Kate to do the same. "What is it?" she whispered, sensing his tension. Jake nodded toward a distant point on the trail ahead. Riders, 3 of them. Kate's heart sank. "Barton?" "Can't tell from here," Jake said, reaching for his spyglass. He studied the distant figures for a long moment. "It's them," he confirmed grimly. "Barton and his men." "How did they find us?" Kate asked, fear clutching at her throat. Jake's expression was grim. "Doesn't matter now. What matters is getting you to safety." He scanned the surrounding terrain. "There's a ravine about half a mile back. We can take cover there, maybe circle around them." They backtracked quickly, finding the ravine Jake had mentioned. It was narrow but deep enough to conceal them and their horses. As they dismounted, Jake checked his rifle and revolver. "Stay here with the horses," he instructed Kate. "I'm going to find a vantage point, see what they're doing." "Be careful," Kate urged, clasping his arm. Jake gave her a quick, fierce kiss. "I always am." He moved away stealthily, keeping low to the ground. Kate waited, one hand on her mare's neck to keep the animal quiet, the other on the revolver Jake had insisted she carry. Minutes stretched like hours. The only sounds were the soft nickering of the horses and the distant cry of an eagle. Then, suddenly, the crack of a rifle shot echoed through the mountains. Kate froze, her blood turning to ice. Another shot followed, then another. Silence fell again, more terrible than the gunfire had been. She waited, counting her heartbeats, fighting the urge to call out for Jake. Then came the sound of footsteps, and Jake appeared at the edge of the ravine, his face tight with tension. "We need to move," he said without preamble. "Now." "What happened?" Kate asked, already moving to mount her horse. "I got one of them," Jake said, his voice hard. "The other 2 scattered. Barton went east. The other one might be circling around to flank us." They rode hard, taking a game trail that wound westward through dense forest. Jake set a punishing pace, checking frequently behind them for signs of pursuit. By nightfall, they'd covered nearly 15 miles of difficult terrain. They made a cold camp that night, not daring to risk a fire. Huddled together for warmth, they spoke in whispers. "Do you think we lost them?" Kate asked. Jake's expression was grim in the moonlight. "For now, but Barton's like a bloodhound on a scent. He won't give up easily." "Why?" Kate asked, the question that had plagued her for weeks finally bursting forth. "Why is he so obsessed? There are other women." Jake's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Men like Barton don't see women as people, just possessions. And he can't stand the thought of losing something he considers his." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But you're not his. You never were. You're your own woman, Kate Morgan, and my wife." The next morning dawned clear and cold. They ate a hasty breakfast of jerky and hardtack, then continued westward. According to Frank's map, they were less than 3 days' ride from the trading post. They rode cautiously, alert for any sign of Barton or his remaining man. The trail grew steeper as they ascended into the mountains, the air thinning perceptibly. By mid-afternoon, snow began to fall light at first, then heavier. "We need to find shelter," Jake said, eyeing the darkening sky. "Storm's coming." They found a small cave set into the mountainside, just large enough for them and their horses. Jake managed to gather enough dry wood for a small fire before the snow became too heavy. The storm raged through the night and into the next day. Trapped in the cave, they rationed their food carefully, unsure how long they would be confined. By the second night, the snow had stopped, but drifts several feet deep surrounded their shelter. "We'll wait another day," Jake decided. "Let the snow settle and compact a bit. It'll be hard going." but the horses can manage it if it's not too soft. That night, as they lay close to the fire, Kate felt a strange peace despite their precarious situation. "I'm not afraid," she realized aloud. Jake looked at her questioningly. "I should be terrified," Kate continued. "We're stranded in a snowstorm, being hunted by a dangerous man miles from anywhere. But I'm not afraid." She smiled at him. "Because I'm with you." Jake's expression softened. "I swore to protect you that first day, and I meant it. Nothing's going to harm you while I draw breath." "It's more than that," Kate said. "It's knowing that whatever happens, we face it together. That's what gives me courage." Jake pulled her close, his kiss warm against the cave's chill. "You've always had courage, Kate. You just needed a reason to find it." The next day, they ventured out into a transformed landscape. The world was blanketed in white, the mountains majestic in their winter garb. The going was slow, the horses struggling through snow that sometimes reached their chests, but they made steady progress. By nightfall, they'd covered perhaps 5 miles, a fraction of their usual distance, but a victory nonetheless given the conditions. They made camp in a stand of pines, where the snow was shallower beneath the trees. As Jake prepared their meager supper, Kate suddenly stiffened, her gaze fixed on something beyond the circle of firelight. "Jake," she whispered urgently. He followed her gaze and saw what had alarmed her, the distant flicker of another campfire, perhaps half a mile away. "Could be trappers," Jake said, though his hand moved to his rifle. "Or Barton," Kate replied. They extinguished their own fire immediately, plunging their camp into darkness. In the sudden silence, they could hear the distant whinny of a horse, not a wild Mustang, but a domesticated animal. "Pack up," Jake said quietly. "We're moving out." "In the dark?" Kate asked, already gathering their belongings. Jake nodded grimly. "Better than sitting here waiting for them to find us at first light." They rode through the night, guided only by moonlight reflecting off the snow. The cold was intense, seeping through their clothing despite their layers. By dawn, both were exhausted, their horses nearly spent. As the first light broke over the eastern horizon, Jake reined in his horse, pointing to a smoke plume rising in the distance. "That's not Barton," he said, relief evident in his voice. "That's the trading post." They urged their tired horses forward with renewed energy. As they drew closer, the outline of buildings came into view, a substantial log structure that must be the trading post itself, several smaller outbuildings, and a corral. They were still a quarter-mile away when a shot rang out, kicking up snow a few yards ahead of them. Jake immediately pulled his horse to a halt, throwing up one hand in a gesture of peace. "We're friends," he called out. "Frank Davis sent us." There was a pause, then a figure emerged from behind a woodpile near the main building. "Identify yourselves," a woman's voice commanded. "Jacob and Katherine Morgan," Jake called back. "Margaret Davis is expecting us." The woman lowered her rifle. "Come ahead then, slowly." As they approached, Kate could see that the woman was perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Despite her age, she stood straight-backed and firm, the rifle still held ready in her capable hands. "I'm Margaret Davis," she said when they were close enough to speak normally. "My brother sent word you might be coming." Her sharp eyes took in their trail-worn appearance. "You look half frozen. Come inside." The interior of the trading post was warm and surprisingly spacious. One half was devoted to the store itself, shelves stocked with everything from tools to fabric to preserved foods. The other half served as living quarters, with a large fireplace, a sturdy table, and several comfortable-looking chairs. An older man with a full beard rose from one of those chairs as they entered. "Harold Davis," he introduced himself, extending a hand to Jake. "Margaret's husband. Welcome to Last Chance Trading Post." Margaret busied herself preparing hot coffee and stew, while Jake explained their situation. Harold listened gravely, nodding occasionally. "Barton," he said when Jake finished. "The name's familiar. Had dealings with him or his people some years back when I was still making supply runs to the eastern settlements. Not a man to cross." He stroked his beard thoughtfully. "But he'd have a hard time finding this place, especially in winter. We're pretty isolated here." "That's what we're counting on," Jake said. Kate, warmed by the fire and the hot food, felt the exhaustion of the past weeks catching up with her. Margaret noticed her drooping eyelids. "You both need rest," she said firmly. "There's a cabin out back we keep for visitors. It's small, but it's warm and private. You can stay there as long as you need." The cabin was indeed small, just one room with a bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a small stove. But to Kate, it seemed like a palace after weeks on the trail. She sank onto the bed, too tired even to remove her boots. Jake did it for her, then covered her with a thick quilt before stoking the stove. "Rest," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'll join you shortly." Kate was asleep before he left the cabin. She woke hours later to find Jake beside her, his arm draped protectively across her waist. Outside, darkness had fallen again, but the cabin was warm and snug. For the first time since they'd left the Davis ranch, Kate allowed herself to believe they might truly be safe. Over the next few days, they settled into life at the trading post. Harold, despite his initial gruff manner, proved to be a kind host, eager to show Jake the operation of the trading post. Margaret, practical and efficient, took Kate under her wing, teaching her the routines of the isolated outpost. A week after their arrival, a group of Shoshone arrived to trade. Kate watched, fascinated, as Harold conducted business with them using a mixture of English, Shoshone words, and sign language. After the trading was complete, the group's leader, a dignified man named Two Feathers, approached Kate with his wife and young daughter. "My wife says you are a teacher," he said in accented but clear English. Surprised Kate nodded. "I am, or I was before." Two Feathers gestured to his daughter, a solemn-eyed child of perhaps 8. "This is Singing Bird. She wants to learn the white man's words on paper. Many of our children do." Kate knelt to be at eye level with the girl. "Would you like me to teach you to read and write, Singing Bird?" The child nodded shyly. Two Feathers looked pleased. "We will bring her, and others who wish to learn when the snow lessens. Is this acceptable?" "It would be my honor," Kate replied, her heart lifting at the prospect of teaching again. After the Shoshone departed, Harold approached Kate. "You handled that well," he said approvingly. "Two Feathers is an important man among the Shoshone. His goodwill is valuable." "I meant what I said," Kate told him. "I'd be honored to teach the children." Harold nodded. "We've been wanting to start a school here for years. Margaret was a teacher once, long ago, but her eyes aren't what they used to be for close work. Having you here, it's like an answer to a prayer we didn't know we'd made." As winter settled in earnest over the mountains, Kate and Jake found their place in the rhythm of life at Last Chance Trading Post. Jake worked alongside Harold, learning the business of trading, repairing buildings, and keeping the passage to the post open despite the snow. Kate helped Margaret with household tasks and began preparing for the school she would open when weather permitted travel again. They lived simply but contentedly in their small cabin, their love deepening with each passing day. Sometimes Kate would catch Jake watching her with a look of wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real, that she was his. "What are you thinking when you look at me that way?" she asked him one evening as they lay together in the warmth of their bed. Jake traced the curve of her cheek with gentle fingers. "I'm thinking that I'm the luckiest man alive, that I found you when I wasn't even looking, and now I can't imagine life without you." Kate nestled closer to him. "I feel the same way. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't ridden by that day." "Don't," Jake said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We found each other. That's all that matters." As spring approached, the snow began to recede, and with it came increased traffic to the trading post. Trappers emerged from their winter cabins with pelts to trade. Shoshone families came with crafts and dried meat to exchange for supplies. And, as promised, children began arriving for Kate's school. She taught them in the main room of the trading post during the quieter hours of the day. The children, a mix of Shoshone and a few from trapper families, proved eager students. Kate found herself drawing on all her training and creativity to bridge the language barriers and cultural differences, but the reward of seeing their faces light up with understanding was worth every challenge. One evening in early spring, as Kate and Jake walked hand in hand around the perimeter of the trading post, enjoying the lengthening daylight, Harold approached them with an unusual serious expression. "Got some news today from a trapper who came in from the east," he said without preamble. "Seems your friend Barton's had a change of fortune." Kate's grip on Jake's hand tightened. "What do you mean?" "Word is, he got himself killed in a gambling dispute in Fort Laramie," Harold said. "Shot dead by a card sharp he accused of cheating." Kate sagged against Jake, relief washing over her in a wave that left her dizzy. "Are you sure?" Harold nodded. "Trapper said he saw the body himself. No mistaking Barton, apparently." Man had a distinctive scar on his chin. "He did," Kate confirmed, remembering the thin white line that had made Barton's cruel smile all the more menacing. Later, alone in their cabin, Kate wept not in sorrow, but in release. The specter that had haunted her for months was finally laid to rest. "It's over," Jake said, holding her close. "You are truly free now." Kate looked up at him through tear-damp lashes. "I've been free since the moment you found me, Jake. You gave me that." In the days that followed, a weight seemed to lift from both of them. Though they had found a measure of contentment at last chance, the knowledge that Barton was no longer a threat opened new possibilities. "We could go anywhere now," Jake said one evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "California, Oregon, back east, if that's what you want." Kate considered this. "Do you want to leave?" Jake was thoughtful. "I've grown fond of this place. Harold's been talking about taking on a partner, maybe stepping back a bit as his health isn't what it was." He looked at her. "But your happiness matters most to me. If you want to go elsewhere, start fresh, I'll follow you anywhere." Kate leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm happy here," she said simply. "I have my school. You have work that suits you. We have friends. It feels like home." Jake's arm tightened around her. "Then we'll stay, if Harold and Margaret will have us." The Davises were more than agreeable to the arrangement. Harold, whose arthritis was worsening with age, was relieved to have a younger man to take on more of the physical aspects of running the trading post. Margaret, who had grown to love Kate like a daughter, was delighted at the prospect of them staying permanently. And so, as spring blossomed into summer, Kate and Jake Morgan put down roots at Last Chance Trading Post. They expanded their cabin, adding a second room to accommodate the family they hoped to have. Kate's school flourished, with children from as far as 30 miles away coming to learn. Jake proved to have a natural talent for trading, his fair dealings earning the respect of both settlers and Native Americans. One evening in late summer, as they sat on their expanded porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Kate took Jake's hand and placed it on her abdomen. "I have news," she said, her voice soft with wonder. Jake's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Are you certain?" Kate nodded, her smile luminous. "Margaret confirmed it. The baby should come in early spring." Jake gathered her into his arms, his joy too great for words. As he held her, Kate thought back to that desperate day when she had staggered away from Cottonwood Springs, beaten and afraid. How could she have known then that her darkest hour would lead her to this, to love, to safety, to the promise of new life? "I choose you," Jake had said that day, covering her with his coat, protecting her when she was at her most vulnerable. "And I choose you," Kate whispered now against his chest, "every day, for all the days to come." Winter came again to the mountains, but this time it brought no fear, only a peaceful interlude as they prepared for the child who would join them when the snow melted. Harold and Margaret fussed over Kate like proud grandparents to be, insisting she rest more and teaching her everything they knew about bringing a baby into the world so far from doctors and midwives. On a clear, cold morning in early March, with snowdrops pushing through the last patches of snow outside their window, Kate gave birth to a daughter, a perfect red-faced little girl with Jake's blue eyes and a dusting of Kate's blonde hair. "Elizabeth," Kate said, cradling the newborn, "after my mother." Jake, his face awestruck as he gazed at his daughter, could only nod in agreement. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, Elizabeth Morgan thrived in the mountain air. She grew sturdy and strong, adored by her parents, and doted on by the Davises and the entire community that had formed around Last Chance Trading Post. On the anniversary of the day Jake had found Kate by the roadside outside Cottonwood Springs, they climbed a small hill near the trading post to watch the sunset. Elizabeth, now toddling confidently, explored the wildflowers while her parents sat hand in hand on a blanket. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Kate asked, watching their daughter's delighted discovery of a butterfly. Jake squeezed her hand. "Sometimes. But then I look at you and Elizabeth, at the life we've built, and I can only be grateful for how things did turn out." Kate leaned against him, content in a way she had once thought impossible. "When you covered me with your coat that day and said, 'I choose you,' did you have any idea what you were getting yourself into?" Jake laughed, the sound warm in the golden light of evening. "Not a clue, but it's the best choice I ever made." As the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Jake and Kate Morgan gathered their daughter into their arms and made their way home, not to the small cabin they had first shared, but to the larger home they had built beside it as their family grew. The last rays of sunlight caught the simple gold band on Kate's finger, a ring Jake had traded a season's worth of pelts to acquire for their first anniversary. It glinted like a promise kept, like a love that had begun in the darkest of circumstances, but had grown into something beautiful and enduring. And as night fell over the mountains, the lights of Last Chance Trading Post glowed like a beacon, a testament to the truth that sometimes, even in the wild reaches of the frontier, Love finds a way to heal what was broken and build something stronger in its place.